I moved to a new town and had to figure out how to pass the time since I didn't know anybody. We moved from Dayton, Ohio to the edge of Wisconsin. It felt like the only thing around here was farmland and small stores. It felt a bit lonely, but I was determined to make the best of it. One of the first things I discovered in my new town was the local movie theater. My parents allowed me to go for Saturday matinees, and it quickly became my favorite escape. I had a particular fondness for thriller movies. Sometimes, when there was nothing else that interested me, I settled for watching cartoons or comedies. On rare occasions, I managed to sneak into movies that were slightly more mature, but nothing too inappropriate. Because the theater was on the small side, and probably with a small budget, they ran movies that were called classics. I later figured out they were called Hammer movies because they were made by Hammer Film Production Company, and they regularly pumped out classics like Dracula, The Gorgon, and cheesy stuff like that. The theater also did some indie horror movies that wouldn't normally be shown to paying crowds. I got to see a lot of foreign movies and began to want more of the same. However, it wasn't just the movies themselves that fascinated me. It was the theater experience as a whole. Whenever the ushers were preoccupied, I would seize the opportunity to explore other theaters and catch glimpses of films with more action. It was during one of these secret adventures that something extraordinary happened. I tend to go to the higher part of the theater. Sometimes there would be couples making out or a lonely guy watching the movie, taking notes in the dark. I figured that this was part of the small town life. As I climbed to the top of the theater, where the unsuspecting moviegoers were less likely to notice me, I felt an unexpected coolness in the air. 2 seats away, a strange presence lingered. I turned to my left, and there, in the dimly lit theater, I saw the shadow of a boy about my age. The movie's brightness momentarily revealed his features. He wore a loose sweater and dark pants. His eyes were wide, yet they held an aura of kindness. Surprisingly, he waved at me, and I waved back, sensing a connection. Looking around, I couldn't spot anyone accompanying him. It seemed as if he, too, had sneaked into the movies, just like me. Curiosity brimming within me, I decided to keep a low profile, observing the boy without saying too much. The movie playing that day was an exceptional old thriller, and I couldn't resist sharing my enthusiasm with him. However, as the lights abruptly switched on, I discovered that the boy had snuck out without me noticing. I brushed it off, chalking it up to our mutual act of sneaking into movies we weren't technically old enough for. I would need to figure out his technique so I wouldn't get in trouble for being in the wrong theater. In the following weeks, my routine of buying tickets for kid-friendly movies and venturing into others continued, and like clockwork, every time I reached the top of the theater, there he was again, a couple of seats away, silently engrossed in the films. I nodded. "I'm Nate," I whispered. He looked at me and waved. "I'm Chase," he said. Chase seldom spoke, but his unwavering focus on the movies intrigued me. His expression remained unchanged, regardless of the intensity or humor on the screen. It was as if he was searching for something within those frames, yet he never seemed happy, upset, or sad. One fateful night, there was a midnight showing of a highly anticipated low-budget, indie sci-fi movie. Excitement coursed through my veins as my mother dropped me off, agreeing to pick me up in a couple of hours. Before entering the theater, I made a quick stop at the restroom to freshen up. As I stood at the urinal, a chilling breeze washed over me, raising the hairs on my arms. I glanced to my side, and to my astonishment, saw Chase emerging from one of the bathroom stalls. It was an unexpected encounter, but I mustered up the courage to strike up a conversation. "You're here to see the new movie too?" I asked, hoping to engage in a meaningful exchange. Chase looked up at me, his gaze piercing yet gentle, and waved in acknowledgement. "Yes, I am. I'm new around here," he replied with a slight nod. His shyness was palpable, and I understood the struggle of being the new kid. Nodding in response, I turned my attention to washing my hands, anticipating that we would watch the movie together and perhaps discuss school or other common interests. But when I finished and looked back, Chase had vanished once more. I found it odd, but brushed it off as my mind playing tricks on me after spending too much time engrossed in movies. I mean, it is kind of weird to be walking out of the bathroom with someone you didn't know. I respected that he gave me space to do my business and not be a creep. Inside the theater, I found a seat and settled in, enjoying the solitude with my box of candy, soda, and popcorn. As the movie trailers played, I felt that familiar coolness, and I instinctively turned to my left. There, sitting beside me, was Chase. I couldn't comprehend how he had arrived unnoticed, but his presence thrilled me. He looked at me, smiled weakly, and nodded. "I'm excited," I confessed. "I've been looking forward to this for a while. How about you?" Chase's smile widened, and he nodded again. "Yes, I have too. For a while." Eager to share the joy, I extended my box of candy toward him. "Want some?" Chase's eyes fixated on the candy but remained distant. He softly replied, "Yes," but made no move to take it from me. Bewildered, I lowered the box onto the armrest between us and turned my attention back to the movie, which was about to begin. Throughout the film, I occasionally stole glances at Chase, trying to gauge his reactions during both intense and slower moments. Yet, his expression remained unchanging, as if he was searching for answers within the moving images. I couldn't help but comment, "This is great. I wish I didn't have to go home." Suddenly, during one of the most epic scenes, I felt a chilling touch against my hand. Startled, I turned to face Chase, expecting an explanation. "You could stay here. Watch all the movies," Chase whispered, his voice colder than the night air. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and his face appeared paler than the glow of the screen. Leaning closer, his voice lower and harder. "Do you want to stay? With me? Here?" The unexpected proposition caught me off guard. Confusion clouded my mind as an explosion on the screen diverted my attention. I reasoned that Chase was merely seeking companionship or connection, although I couldn't quite comprehend his words. Maybe he was a weird kid who didn't know how to make friends. As the movie reached its climax, we watched the remainder in silence. When the credits began to roll, a few remaining audience members walked out, eager to beat the crowd. I waited until the very end, contemplating what Chase had said. Finally, I turned to him, eager for clarification. "What were you saying?" I asked, the lights gradually brightening the theater. Chase leaned closer, his eyes filled with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "You can stay here. You can always watch movies. With me. Here," he pointed to the movie screen. "Do you want to stay?" His touch brushed against my wrist, sending an icy chill through my body. Before I could respond, a voice echoed from below. "Hey, kid, you gotta go now." I glanced towards the usher, a tired-looking teenager holding a broom and dustpan, patiently waiting for me to leave. I stood up, gathering my trash, but when I turned back, Chase had gone. I looked back at the usher, who was sighing loudly and watching me. As I made my way down the aisle, I looked back at where I had been sitting. "Did you see the other kid?" I asked the usher, hoping to confirm that I wasn't going insane. The usher shook his head, fatigue evident in his eyes. "No, kid, just you." I hung around just outside the theater door, hoping to see Chase sneak out, or see if someone would go in to find him. Nothing happened for 10 minutes or so. My phone buzzed, and I saw a text from my mom, waiting outside in the car. As I left, I saw in the distance down the hall a reflection on the glass exit door. It was a shadow of a figure that I assumed was Chase, but his eyes were no longer bright or longing. The eyes were wide, brilliantly red, and menacing. His head was slightly down, and he had a scowl that promised that he would eat me alive. I watched as the usher came out, looking around and saw me watching the door. He looked at the door, but then back to me. "You can't go that way. You have to exit the front of the building." "Have a good night," the usher said, moving towards the door where Chase was just standing. The usher made a left and went into another theater. Chase lingered, but after a few seconds, faded into the shadows. His eyes were still burning with red hatred. A horn honked, and I turned to see my mom waving me down. I looked back, but didn't see the kid, or whatever he was, anymore. I'm not sure what that was or how no one else was able to see him, but I have started making other friends at school and staying far away from the downtown movie theater. I hope I never see Chase again.